Hello, my name is Robin Whelan and I am accompanied by Nathan Jones.
Hello.
In this video, we shall take you through the design process behind our UDK level, from conception to completion.
The first thing we did was conduct a series of tests to determine how large a 4096 by 4096 footprint actually was, and to measure a variety of parametrics concerning the in-game avatar. We swiftly determined that the footprint was too small for a number of the more grand visions we had.
On the other hand, we noted that there was no restriction on verticality. This immediately suggested a multi-level map. We both agreed that a subway station was an evocative, multi-layered concept, and could be further restricted by collapsing parts of the level.
We also felt that such a map suited the escape scenario, and that as such we would be creating a single-player experience with puzzles for the player to solve. Now that we knew what we wanted to make, we needed to plan it.
I began by sketching a very loose layout, starting from the platform and working my way upwards. This went through a series of revisions until I arrived at a version that I was happy to present. By this point, I had also established that the pencil and paper method was far too slow and imprecise.
It was suggested that we use AutoCAD for our detailed plans. Using these plans, I built our first full white box. The plans were as hoped, clear and precise. I had little trouble following them.
Before the white box was completed, we went into deep discussion on how we would lay out the puzzles and the lighting. From what we discussed at the beginning of the assignment, we decided the level would have an apocalyptic theme, and from this point, we went on to decide how everything in the level should be designed.
When we decided on the theme, we then discussed the lighting. Since a series of unfortunate events have happened to the subway, we came to the conclusion that the further the player goes down, the darker it gets, as well as how devastating the damage is.
Once the basic white box was completed, we decided on the placement of the main textures of the level. For the walls of the level, we went with a white brick texture. This is common throughout the level, as actual subways follow this layout. To make the floor texture, we had to take a white tile texture from Google and darkened it to fit the theme of the subways, while for the ceiling, we imported a panel texture and applied it to almost all the ceilings on all the floors.
To fit with the lighting of the level, I made a pale yellow texture which I added an emissive to it, so it would glow like a ceiling light. The same texture was applied to every light in the level, including the train headlights.
Throughout the level, we have added many decals. These include menus for the food areas, adverts for the middle level, and graffiti for the platform level. To get the graffiti to work, we had to remove the white background.
As the white box design came to a close, we began adding finishing touches to it. In the first level of the map, we added windows to add extra light to the top floor so it would be well lit and the player could see the objectives.
While building the top floor, we took into consideration everything we wanted to be placed there, such as the cafe. In this area, the player can find the tip cup, a key piece for progression further into the level. This, however, can only be accessed once the player has seen the turnstiles.
To coincide with the tip cup, we have the ticket machine. With a tip cup collected, using Kismet we programmed in several balls and ball comparisons, so the player would only be able to receive a ticket from the machine when they have seen both the exit from the first floor and have collected the tip cup. With these balls enabled, the player can interact with it, and with Matinee, the ticket is animated to come out of the machine. Once collected, the player can move on to the turnstiles.
The turnstiles, which block the player's path further down the subway, use a dynamic blocking volume to stop them from moving any further. Once the ticket is used on the turnstile, the blocking volume is destroyed, and another one appears behind the player and pushes them through the turnstile, blocking them from going back.
Moving on to the second level.
At this point, the player will notice an immediate change in lighting, as the closer the player gets to the collapse, the less lighting there is. The player may start to feel a sense of tension. They will also notice that the only other source of lighting is coming from the one operational lift on this level. Seeing as the stairs are blocked off by a shutter, we draw the player to the lift, and from there they can operate it by the use of a key, which is linked up to the lift Matinee through Kismet. The Matinee for the lift is quite complicated, as it involves using multiple models made of CSGs rather than one big model, as the collision for it would not allow the player to enter. The lift stops midway down and alerts the player that it is going to fall through the use of sound. The lift then drops the rest of the way and lands at the bottom, where it plays a crashing sound, shakes the player camera and releases a big plume of smoke, which indicates that the lift can no longer be used.
Seeing as the lift is a one-way trip down, the player is now stuck in the dark platform floor. One of the first things the player might notice is little particles of dust floating around. We added these through the use of a particle emitter. The area covers all the platform station. It gives the feeling of long abandonment to the player who has just entered this for the first time. After exiting the lift, the player will see that the only lights available are the train headlights, but these don't give off that much light. So the player is drawn to follow them rather than explore the unlit areas. From the train lights, the player can see a red lit area. Seeing as it is different from everything else in that area, the player may wander towards it. This area is where they can find a torch. This torch, as well as the light that goes with it, is attached to the player model through Kismet and exists along with the player throughout the game, but is only visible once they have picked up the torch.
When the player collects the torch, they will find that it does not produce light, and this is alerted to the player by the use of announcements through Kismet. It tells them the torch has no batteries, and that they remember seeing some on the newsstand upstairs.
If the player has explored the stairs, they will remember that the path upstairs is blocked by a shutter, and are told by another announcement that they will need to find a button to open them. This button can be found in the other red room on the other side of the tracks on the platform level. Once the player gets near it, they can open the shutters with a use key. When the player activates it, the shutters will move. However, because the player can't see this, we get a sound cue, an announcement to alert them that something is moving.
The player can find the batteries on the newsstand, and when collected, the torch lights up. Much like the torch, the movable spotlight is invisible at the start of the game, and is toggled back on by the batteries the player picks up. With the light now working, the player can explore the dark areas to the fullest, taking in more of the scenery of the level, such as the litter and graffiti decals, which have been put in to make it more atmospheric. This also lets the player progress down the tunnel until they hit a trigger volume that without the torch or batteries would block them from progressing, but with them it would let the player know they can finally leave, and with Kismet console commands, the level ends there.